Video games go back to about 1950, but only really became popular in the 70s and 80s and have since become a rapidly rising phenomenon. The video game industry has become one of the richest and most influential of modern times, and according to Forbes, the global market for video games is expected to grow from $67 billion in 2012 to $82 billion in 2017. The first video game is credited to the physicist Willie Higginbotham, who created a tennis-like game which was played on an oscilloscope. However, the first interactive game, and generally most mainstream, was Steve Russell's classic, Space War. Some of the world's biggest video games include heavy amounts of violence, which plays a huge part in their popularity. Although these games have a high age rating, one of the main demographic of players are teenagers and reasonably young children, who are often not old enough to legally play. Many critics believe this violence should not be available for younger audiences and accounts for damage to their mental state and can seriously affect them growing up. Call of Duty is one of the most popular game series available, and it is not surprising the amount of controversy it has caused over its long time in the public eye. This controversy has mainly come from the violence involved, and one of the most notable incidents includes the mission known as No Russian. In this, you play as an undercover terrorist who opened fires on an airport full of unarmed citizens. This especially caused outrage due to the fact of recent terrorist attacks in the real world, most notably 9/11. Grand Theft Auto, again, is another extremely popular series that has gained a huge following ever since its debut game in 1997. The Grand Theft Auto series is well known for all the controversy it has brought ever since its first game. However, Rockstar, the game creators, used the controversy the series has accumulated in order to sell more copies and become one of the highest grossing game series there has ever been. Some say the violence in these games is extremely unnecessary, including the murder of prostitutes and innocent bystanders on the street with a huge array of weapons, and probably most notably the torture of a suspected terrorist in the latest installment, Grand Theft Auto 5. But do video games, such as Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, cause the violence they show and are so well known for to be mimicked in the real world? Grand Theft Childhood, The Surprising Truth About Violent Video Games and What Parents Can Do, is a book by Lawrence Kuttner and Cheryl K. Olson. For the book, Kuttner and Olson surveyed 1,254 children aged 12 to 14 at schools in South Carolina and Pennsylvania, and 500 of the kids' parents. Also, they held focus groups with 42 middle school boys from the greater Boston area who regularly play video games, as well as 21 parents of these boys. What they found is that almost half of boys played 6 or more hours per week, 1 in 8 played more than 15 hours a week, and boys were 10 times more likely as girls to play 15 plus hours per week. A third of boys played electronic games almost every day, compared with 10% of girls. Among girls who played any games in a typical week, almost a third, 31%, had played at least one mature rated title a lot in the last 6 months. Among boys, over 2/3 regularly played one of the more M-rated game titles. The book also states, boys who played any M-rated game a lot were twice as likely to be in a physical fight, to hit or beat up someone, to damage property for fun, to steal something from a store, to get poor school grades, or to get into trouble with a teacher or principal. Girls that played M-rated games a lot, they were 4 times more likely to be in a physical fight, 3 times more likely to damage property just for fun, to skip classes or school without an excuse, to be suspended from school or get poor grades, and twice as likely to hit or beat up someone, and get in trouble with a teacher or principal. One high-profile example of mimicking violent video games comes from the Sandy Hook shooting. The event that took place on December 14, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut shocked the whole world when 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 young children and 6 carers at Sandy Hook Elementary School. It was revealed after the shooting took place that Lanza had spent hours every day playing Call of Duty, and many believe this played a huge part in the events that followed. However, many believe in the theory of catharsis when it comes to video games. Glenn G. Sparks, Cherry W. Sparks, and Erin A. Sparks all talk about this in the book Media Effects, Advances in Theory and Research. They suggested that through catharsis, a child or adolescent is provided the opportunity to release his or her aggression while playing a video game, which in turn facilitates a decrease in his or her need to carry out these actions in real-life situations. Violence is not the only transgression that exists in the video game industry. Sex also plays a huge part in its popularity and is prevalent throughout many different games. Prostitution plays a huge part in the Grand Theft Auto series and leaves little to the imagination. But it is something that never made it into a final game that brought the most criticism. In the PlayStation 2 game, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, there was a mini-game found in the game's script called Hot Coffee, where the main character took part in sexual explicit activity in order to gain a high excitement level. Arguably, the most talked about sexual activity in a video game comes from Custer's Revenge. This is a game that caused a huge uproar on its release in 1982. The character you play as is based on George Armstrong Custer, and the criticism came from the fact that you use the character to repeatedly rape a tied-up Native American woman. The title character is only seen wearing a hat, boots, and bandana, with an erection clearly visible. One of the biggest dangers that comes from video games tends to occur in some of the lower rated multiplayer online games. This danger comes in the form of grooming. One of the most infamous events in the UK of this only occurred a short 2 years ago in the grooming and tragic murder of 14-year-old boy Breck Bednar. Lewis Danes was a 19-year-old who managed to befriend Bednar and his group of friends through playing Minecraft online. Lewis Danes was able to isolate Breck from his friends and family through a long string of lies that included his career, his living situation, and qualifications. Ultimately, Danes was able to lure Bednar to his London apartment, where he stabbed the 14-year-old to death. To conclude, there has been many transgressions occur in the video game industry. Arguably the most prevalent and most talked about is the violence that is shown throughout a huge range of different games. Although there will always be criticism towards this from the media, violence plays a huge part in the popularity, and for this reason it will always be involved for as long as games are a part of popular culture. This is the same case for sexual content, as it is proved in other industries such as film and music. Just like violence, sex is extremely popular and is able to create a huge profit.